where autism meets attachment. There are some overlaps. There's documented overlaps of this, and it's something we need to understand as counsellors, as psychotherapists, specifically as we work with a neurodivergent group.
Absolutely, Ken. Things aren't always as cut and dried as we might like to think. We might see a presentation, go to supervision and say, I think this is autism. However, some dialogical thinking where you think one thing, but you also then ask the question, what else can be true? What else might be true? So you can hold two different ideas at the same time, which I always think is a handy way of living your life. And that brings us really to this discussion, Ken, that having an understanding of the difference between autism and attachment difficulties is a very handy thing to have. So you can hold two ideas. It could be this, but it could be that. And that's where we start this quite fascinating conversation, Ken.
Yes. And I like how you've put could be into that sentence, because that's all we have to work with. Unless the person is on a formal road to diagnosis or they've self-diagnosed as neurodivergent, we're not there to diagnose them, but to hold information and to hold all the information, to have the could-be's and acknowledge that there are multiple possibilities. But it's really important for us to first understand the main biological difference between somebody who comes in who is autistic and somebody who may present with very similar presentations but related to attachment or their previous life trauma. And when we're looking at autism, we're talking about a neurotype. It is a way that the brain functions. That person was born, and that is the way that their brain was made up, and that is the way that they function within society. Attachment is created because of the relationships or the experience that we have when we are very young or as we are developing, and it is relationships with ourselves and others. And I think they're very different from that standpoint, Rory, but there's some other major differences as well. Can you just walk us through what the differences are?
Yes, absolutely, Ken. You've alluded to the fact that one is a neurodevelopmental difference. With autism, the brain is wired differently from birth. With attachment difficulties, it's usually caused by relational or environmental issues, and it could be caused by disruptions such as family breakups or caregivers not being available, neglect, where children are not looked after and cared for and loved. In terms of the onset, autism or neurodivergence, it actually presents from early childhood, and signs can be seen before the age of 3. Attachment issues usually develops after birth, and it's function of relationships with caregivers. And what can happen is that if caregivers aren't consistent, aren't loving, aren't supportive, or they're unavailable for whatever reason, it's not always neglect. Sometimes you might have a caregiver who's spent a lot of time in hospital, being ill. And I think one final aspect is with autism, the differences are communication-based, sensory processing, maybe restricted, repetitive behaviours or passions, interests, where with attachments, it's shaped by early experience, and it's usually things like fear of abandonment, avoidance, mistrust or hypervigilance. So those are the main differences. I have produced a handout for this. I think it's something that therapists should know about because it presents more than we think.
One of the things that occurred to me as you were sharing that, Rory, one of the things we see with neurodivergence is it has a very strong link to genetics. It can run in families, so there's another clue there. But of course, we're talking now about the diagnostic side of things. But what is it that we might see, Rory? Because it's interesting, isn't it? It's very similar. What might we see from attachment and why is it there? Because you were saying about how one is neurological and it is a way of processing and how that person is and how they process. The other one is very much based in protection of self because of experiences, which I guess with attachment theory, it is not maybe consciously available information to that person. They might be acting out or will be acting out most of the time from a subconscious point of view. What is it that we look out for, Rory, in the therapy room?
I'm a great believer in clinical thinking, and clinical thinking is where you're working with the client and you're in the relationship, and then you have this 30,000-foot view, like you're looking out of a plane window, you're looking down on the relationship, and you're saying, part of you is saying to yourself, what am I seeing here? And I think, as a general broad brush observation, autism doesn't go away. If people are autistic, they're autistic, and individuals can have a better, happier life if they're supported. There's adjustments, and you understand their way of being. And usually it can be things like they show less eye contact. If you're working with children, they don't play with the peers so much. They could be a bit socially aloof. And sometimes they have repetitive behaviours or passions. It used to be called special interest, now they're called passions. Those are real telltale signs. With attachment, the change is that attachment can change, because with attachment, we can build new neural pathways. And I think the key phrase here with attachment, Ken, is secure. That's the key thing. People with attachment issues do not feel secure. Security can be a big part of how they are. People with autism may feel uncomfortable, they may feel misunderstood, but the word secure in its purest form is just that. And therapy can change attachment. Therapy can help people change attachment. If it's an attachment issue, therapy will help you feel regulated. And that's another word, regulation. Makes you feel that you're regulated, secure, and that you can start to build trust with people. And those are the key differences.
Yeah, I like that. I remember when I was training to be a counsellor, one of the exercises that we did when we were studying attachment theory was to identify our own attachment style. And I found it really enlightening. Now, at the time, I did not know that I was autistic. However, when I started delving into the attachment styles, I started to have massive aha moments, and I started attributing a lot of what I feel and experience to attachment. And I think it's quite easy to confuse attachment to neurodivergence, specifically autism, because there are similar presentations or similar feelings. But you've very nicely explained how the mechanisms behind those are so very different. So we may be working with a client and they may not show much eye contact, and that can be used as a clue to indicate signs of autism. But at the same time, Rory, that could very well be an attachment style where the person feels awkward within that situation, they don't trust the situation, and here they are in a situation now where they feel really vulnerable. And I think this just circles back again to the importance of formal training, because we can't take an indicator and say, yes, that's it, if it's a standalone. There's so much more of that person we need to take in and understand in order to work with that person in the way that is going to best suit them, Rory.
Absolutely. And there's a couple of takeaways here. And the first is that we're not here to diagnose or to analyse. What we're here to do as therapists is to provide a safe, supported space that people can come and talk about their difficulties. That's really the bread and butter of our work as therapists. If you're listening very carefully to the client as they're speaking about what's happening, they give you very strong clues whether they're talking from a neurodivergent place or maybe from an attachment place. But what is absolutely true, and where you cannot go wrong as a therapist, is if you have an understanding of autism or how to work with neurodivergence, we'll call it autism-informed practice. And also if you've got a trauma-informed background, because if those are built into your practice, by default, you will be offering the client on two levels, as well as your core modality, a really strong service. If you're trauma-informed, you can work with that early attachment damage. I feel really passionate about this because I have attachment issues and neurodivergence issues. And not even I can tell the difference sometimes. But I do know that if I see a therapist, I want someone who could hold both of those in a
Yeah.
secure place.
Oh, I like that. That's a beautiful way to come into land from this topic, Rory. And if you're interested in training as a trauma-informed therapist, you can go to counsellingtutor.com. We offer that training. And we've also got a handout for you on this topic that Rory has created. You can download free of charge, Understanding the Difference Between Autism and Attachment Difficulties.